Drew Gilbert's been really, really good. Is he going to force Dana Brown's hand? Are we going to see Drew Gilbert at some point this season?
I think it's September. I think it's still a September call-up unless there's a major issue with an injury or the health of several outfielders. I just don't feel like this is the year. I think he's on the fast track. It's obvious. He's also living up to billing every stop that he makes. But I don't think until now playoff roster is a different story, but I think the chances of seeing Drew Gilbert before September 1, I think are very slim. But I think that for a September call-up and a potential to be on the playoff roster, I think that's where we could have a conversation.
Things have to happen for it to actually take place. Like Drew Gilbert's going to need to continue to be hot, like to the point where it's like, man, this guy might be an upgrade in our lineup. He might be an upgrade over what we're running out there every single day. Right now, even without Michael Brantley, you're getting away with an outfield that's still solid.
Yep.
Like Jake Myers is producing pretty good. Chas McCormick was in the lineup with Jake Myers yesterday. You DH'd Yordan Alvarez. So, like, there's not a tremendous demand and need for another outfielder yet. And you're still getting Michael Brantley back. So the only way that I see Drew Gilbert, and I don't see him as a September call-up. I just don't see him starting the clock if he's sitting the bench. Like, taxi squad makes sense to me. Like, travel with the team like Jeremy Pena did and Carlos Correa last year. That makes a lot of sense to me. I don't think they bring him up to the official roster unless he's going to be getting consistent playing time and starting a decent amount of games. And the only path I see for him starting games is continued success in the minors. Michael Brantley does not come back, and Chas McCormick and or Jake Myers aren't producing to the level where you can have them in the lineup every day. Because Tucker in right, Chas Jake in center, Chas Jake in left, Yordan in left, Yordan DHing. You still have enough coverage, even without Michael Brantley, to field a pretty good big league outfield that can hit a little bit.
Yeah, look, I don't want to start the clock too soon. I don't want him, being so hell-bent on, or they being so hell-bent on fast-tracking him that he misses a couple steps and along the way, he has a hard time dealing with major league pitching and adjusting and doing all these things. And I think that the team is just fine the way it is right now. Like I said, if there's a major injury or another injury that happens or two, God forbid, that's when you have no choice but to have to try and do something like that. And obviously, because the trade deadline hasn't happened yet either, you still have the ability to do something else. But I think after the trade deadline, if an injury happens or something occurs in August, that's something you could address, but I think he's a September call-up, and as I've said before, I believe that he's a guy that, whether he's on the playoff roster or not, you take him along for the ride.
But you don't need to be on the roster to go along for the ride. Like, they didn't do that with Jeremy Pena. Like, they didn't call him up. What's the purpose of calling him up in September to be on the roster if he's playing once every seventh day?
Because, at that point, and I don't know, how you feel about how many at-bats he still needs to keep having, but I think that if you call him up in September and you give him some run and get a taste of the big leagues and see where he's at against major league pitching and evaluate him further, look, the Yankees did it with Jeter too, and he didn't play. But they wanted him to get a taste of what that heightened sense of urgency is and the stress of playoff games and understand what it's like so that when he actually gets there and he is counted on, he's already kind of been there and felt it a little bit. I have no problem with that.
You can do that without putting him on the roster, though.
Right. I said that, but you don't have to have him on the roster. I said whether he's a September call-up and then he's on your playoff roster or not.
Right, but if you put him on the September roster, are you saying to call him up in September and have him on the roster, the 28-man roster?
He plays in September.
Okay.
But then when you choose the playoff roster, he doesn't necessarily have to be on the playoff roster, but you still bring him along.
That's where I kind of disagree slightly. Is I don't see them calling him up, period, unless he's playing consistently.
Okay.
Playing consistently.
I think there's a chance he's up sooner than that if Brantley's not back.
But Chas and Jake would have to be struggling, I believe. And Dre brings up another avenue, too, unless they trade Chas or Jake for a starting pitcher. I think it's another path for Gilbert to get up, too.
Dusty's also he's not showing that he's going to play Chas and Jake in left and center every game also.
Right, which is a little concerning.
So it's like if he's already showing that it's one of those guys in center and then left field's more of a rotator, you include Julks, it makes sense. But you also, I think we have to now factor in that this organization is going to do business differently with prospects. I mean, look what the Atlanta Braves did last year. They signed Michael Harris, Spencer Strider, Matt Olson, and Austin Riley to 8+ year contracts in the middle of the season. I'm not saying Gilbert would get that extension now, but that's what Dana Brown and the Atlanta Braves did in the past, is they would bring these guys up, and then instead of waiting for your Kyle Tucker question of can you pay him before he leaves in 2 years, you're signing him an 8 to 10 year deal right away.
He has to be an upgrade, though.
Yeah, you
like
got to
Michael Harris was an upgrade in center field. Like if you're doing that, which again I believe that it's plausible, Drew Gilbert would have to be an upgrade over somebody who's getting consistent starts. And look, maybe it's an upgrade over Jolks. Maybe Dusty wants a platoon guy in left field where he has Drew Gilbert that faces righties and Chas McCormick and or Jake Myers that faces lefties. But
Do
if
you guys
you're
believe
doing
he's
that,
not
he
a
has
center
to play
fielder?
routinely. No, I think he's a center fielder.
So I think he's a center fielder too, which makes it Jake, who was the center fielder of the future for Click. Jake, if Jake's expendable and he's not performing offensively, and they feel like he's ready to play center field now, yeah, then I think that there's a chance.
But with the way that Jake's playing right now, I don't think they would do it.
No,
like Jake would have to go into some sort of slump,
Right.
or as Dre's point, trade him,
or he gets hurt
Drew Gilbert that way. And I think too, hurt injury. Drew Gilbert's playing a lot of right field right now, and I don't think it's because they view right field as his future position. I believe it's because they want position flexibility, where if they call him up to the big league team because there's some injuries or whatever the case may be, or he could be able to play any outfield position comfortably. I'm not reading too much into him playing right. I think he's a center fielder going
But it's
forward.
easy to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, most people do.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to do. Some people say, "Oh, they're sending a message to Tucker's camp." Oh, I doubt that, and I don't think Tucker's camp is worried either.
No, well, yeah, I don't think anybody's
Tucker's going to get
Tucker's
Tucker's going to get paid no matter where he goes. It's just that it's going to be real interesting to see, with what he is expecting and what he's turned down already, if you believe what you've heard, and he's not settling for Jordan figures, and he's probably going to get it whether you give it to him or not.
To Joe's point, I agree with Dana Brown and this organization going forward. They're not going to be scared to call prospects up. I think that they would be very willing to do it faster than we've ever seen before with Click and with Luno. But he's going to have to play a lot. Like, you almost have to do it if he's going to start. Like Michael Harris, when they called him up, immediate starter. Well, you're not going to call up a prospect if he's not starting immediately.
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
You got to get better and prove that it's just not a one season wonder, or you get a guy that, again, when we look at how Jake was when he first came up, he caught everybody surprised. Suddenly he had power we didn't know he had. He was doing everything right. Then the injuries happened. And I dare I say he's still not the player he was before he got hurt, though he's getting closer to being what they wanted him to be.
Yeah.
You got to make sure when you're ready to give an 8-year contract to someone that they are here for the long haul to perform at that level too.
Little different conversation there than the one we were having. Because, I'd give Hunter Brown a contract right now without batting an eye. I'd give Jeremy Payne a contract right now without batting an eye.
And I understand your thinking in doing that, but I also, to my point, I've got to be damn sure that this guy's going to have it for the long haul, because all it takes is one of those to backfire that derails all the forward momentum as a franchise that you've been doing.
Derail might be strong. I don't think
maybe
Jose Abreu's
not all of a sudden by itself, but yeah, Abreu is a shorter term sample of it. But if you go commit 8 to 10 years at a monstrous amount of money, and then the guy just turns out to be average-ish,
that's the downside
and falls
of it.
Off.
That's the downside of it. But the upside is that you get 8 to 10 years of their prime years, and you look at Jordan's. Jordan is an absolute bargain. So it depends. A lot matters, but I would have if the Astros announced an extension for Jeremy Pena right now, I'd be thrilled. If the Astros announced an extension for Hunter Brown right now, I'd be thrilled. I would sign off on those right now.